Well, it finally did something for this family, my parents said, selling the lakeside cabin my grandma left to me for my brother's pilot training. At least now you're useful. He smirked. 4 years later, at his pilot license awards ceremony, the screen lit up with the truth. Dad froze. I stepped to the mic. I'm Victoria, and I grew up in Reno, Nevada, in a house where love was handed out like rationed sugar, only to whoever made the family look good. In our living room, my brother David was the golden boy, the one born for the sky, the one my parents spoke about the way people speak about weather they can't control. Reverent, helpless, a little afraid. Me? I was the quiet one with a brain that liked patterns. I liked databases. I liked the clean, cold honesty of numbers. My father called it busy work, like I spent my free time alphabetizing dust. My mother smiled the kind of smile that said, "You're fine, you're just not him." The only place I ever felt truly safe was a small cabin on the edge of Lake Tahoe, old cedar boards, a porch that creaked like a warning, and air so sharp it felt like a promise. My grandma took me there when I was a kid, when my parents were too busy with David's flight camps and scholarships and glossy brochures. She'd press hot cocoa into my hands and say, "You don't need to sparkle for anyone. You're allowed to be solid." At that cabin, I wrote my first clumsy algorithms on a secondhand laptop, listening to the lake slap the shore like it was applauding me in private. That place didn't care if I was useful. It just held me. And then my grandma had a stroke and died before she could get the will notarized. It's almost funny, in a dark way, how fast grief becomes paperwork. One day you're standing in a funeral home trying not to look at the casket too long. The next, you're learning what probate means while people you share DNA with start speaking in polite, predatory sentences. I found out the cabin was gone the way you find out your entire life has been rearranged, through a casual comment, delivered like a weather update. I was at my parents' kitchen counter, holding a mug I didn't want, while my mother chattered about David's big opportunity. My father stood behind her, arms folded, satisfied in a way that made my skin crawl. "We had to move quickly," my father said, as if we'd been racing towards something noble. "Move quickly? For what?" I asked, already feeling the ground tilt. My mother set her mug down carefully. "Honey, don't make that face." "What face?" "The one that says you're about to be dramatic." My father slid a folder across the counter. Sales documents, a buyer's signature. The Tahoe address printed in black ink like an obituary. I stared, waiting for the words to rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. They didn't. "You sold it," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like someone else's emergency. My father exhaled through his nose like I was slow. "It wasn't legally yours yet. There was no notarized will. That's how the law works. That cabin was her promise to me." My mother leaned in, gentle in the way a nurse is gentle before a shot. "We didn't do this to you. We did it for the family." My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. For David. My father didn't deny it. He didn't even blink. He got into an elite flight academy. Tuition isn't cheap. I opened the folder with shaking hands. 180,000, I said. "You sold it for 180,000? My father shrugged. "A quick close. The cabin was worth at least 600. Not to us." That was the moment. Not the price, not the papers, not even the loss. That sentence not to us. Like my grandmother's love had been reduced to a line item. I looked up. "So you stole my inheritance." My mother's face tightened. "Don't say stole. That's ugly." I laughed once, sharp and ugly, because apparently that's what my body does when it's cornered. Ugly as selling the only thing she left me behind my back. My father leaned forward, eyes flat, and then he delivered the line like it was wisdom carved in stone. "Well, it finally did something for this family. Something bigger, like my safe place was a coupon he'd redeemed." David walked in then, still wearing the smugness he'd been raised in. He tossed a set of car keys in the air and caught them, like he couldn't stop performing even in his own home. "What's going on?" he asked, but he wasn't curious. He was entertained. I turned toward him, chest burning. "They sold Grandma's cabin." David's smile widened slowly, like a blade being pulled from a sheath. He twirled the keys around his finger. "Yeah," he said. "It's called investing. You should try it sometime." "Investing in what? Fraud?" He shrugged. "In me." My mother rushed in with her favorite weapon, softness. Victoria, sweetheart, you'll understand when you're older. I'm older than him. My father's voice cut through it. Don't be childish. David stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was offering me a secret. At least now you're useful, he said, smirking. That cabin finally did something. I don't remember putting my mug down. I only remember the heat in my face and the sick clarity in my mind. They will never choose me. Not once. Not ever. So I didn't beg. I went to my childhood room, grabbed a duffel bag, stuffed it with whatever didn't feel contaminated, and walked out without giving them the dignity of a tearful speech. My mother called after me, offended. Where are you going? Somewhere I'm not a donation box, I said. My father didn't chase me. He didn't apologize. He just said, cold as a closed door, don't come crawling back. I didn't. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not the next year. I moved into a small apartment with mismatched furniture and silence that felt like medicine. I worked like someone trying to outrun a haunting. My brain, the one my father called useless, became my lifeline. I studied data auditing and forensic analysis the way other people study scripture, devout, hungry, terrified of wasting time. Because here's the thing about being treated like you don't matter. You either learn to disappear or you learn to become undeniable. I didn't become a billionaire. I didn't marry a tech mogul. I didn't win the lottery. I got something harder, less flashy, and much more satisfying: competence. By the time I was 29, I had a job in the FAA's investigative division, specializing in data audits, digging through logs, flight records, GPS transponders, training hours, anything that could tell the truth when humans lied. My salary hit $150,000, which my parents would have called nice for you if they'd bothered to ask. My boss was Asher Heatherly. The first time I met him, he didn't smile. He didn't try to charm me. He just slid a stack of reports toward me and watched to see if I'd flinch. Most people did. I didn't. Asher was a veteran of aviation, gray at the temples, voice like sandpaper, eyes that had seen what happens when someone cuts corners in the sky. He didn't waste words. He didn't waste trust either. But over time, he did something my father never did. He respected me out loud. One night, after we'd spent hours chasing an anomaly through training logs, I found the needle. I laid it out cleanly on his desk: timestamps, correlated data, pattern recognition, a tidy little coffin for someone's lie. Asher stared at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Your father, he said, was blind if he traded brains like yours for a pretty uniform. I swallowed. Compliments still hit me like foreign objects. Asher leaned back. You know what your work does, Victoria? I shrugged, because humility was a survival habit I couldn't kick. It finds errors. It saves lives, he corrected, because air doesn't forgive arrogance. I went home that night and sat on my couch in the dark, letting the words settle. Saves lives. My grandmother would have liked that. 3 years into the job, Asher assigned me a regional audit. Nevada training schools. Routine, he said. But Asher's idea of routine always felt like standing near a fault line. I built an algorithm to flag inconsistencies across flight logs, exam results, instructor signatures, GPS data, and weather reports. The data set was messy, as always. Human handwriting dragged into digital form, missing timestamps, accidental omissions. Then one file lit up like a flare. Critical anomaly. Repeated, structured, not random error. I clicked into the school profile, and my stomach went hollow. It was David's Academy. For a second, I just stared at the screen, waiting for the universe to blink. It didn't. I thought about closing the file, about telling Asher I needed someone else on it, about pretending I never saw it, because the past had already taken enough from me. Then I heard my father's voice in my head. Be grateful. And my brother's. At least now you're useful. The words landed differently now. Not like wounds. Like fuel. I pulled the raw data. At first glance, David looked like a star. Perfect hours. High marks. Night flight experience in difficult conditions. Quick progression. It was the kind of profile airlines love. Confident, clean, impressive on paper. But paper doesn't fly. When I overlaid David's flight log with the GPS transponder data from the training aircraft, the story changed. The nights he supposedly flew in storms? The plane didn't leave the ground, engine off. Hangar coordinates steady as a heartbeat. I checked the weather reports. Those nights really had been bad. Wind shear advisories, low visibility, heavy precipitation. The Academy had used the storms as a cover, because nobody expects a training plane to fly in dangerous conditions. A perfect hiding place for a fake hour. I kept going, because once you see the first crack, you start looking for the collapse. David had failed several internal evaluations, panic responses in simulated emergencies, poor decision-making, inconsistencies in instrument readings. Those fails didn't appear in his official file. They'd been smoothed away. I sat back in my chair, hands cold, heart loud. So he wasn't just spoiled, he was dangerous. And then the money. A lie this clean doesn't happen on pride alone. It needs grease. I traced financial records, academy invoices, internal transfers, instructor compensation. I expected to find inflated tuition or extra fees. What I found was worse. A $50,000 transfer into an offshore account tied to the academy's chief instructor. Sender, my father. My throat tightened. I pulled the bank trail, the metadata, the timing. The transfer matched the period when David's file magically transformed from shaky to stellar. A bribe. Paid with my cabin. I printed everything. My hands didn't tremble this time. Anger can be stabilizing. I walked into Asher's office with a folder thick enough to feel like a weapon. Asher looked up. "You've got that face," he said. "What face?" "The one that says someone's about to learn consequences." I laid the folder down. "It's David's Academy." Asher's expression hardened, but he didn't interrupt. He read. He flipped pages. He went quiet in a way that felt like pressure building behind a dam. When he finished, he set the last page down carefully. "This isn't just cheating," he said. "I know." He tapped the GPS charts. "These people put unqualified pilots into the system." He tapped the offshore transfer. "And they did it with bribery." I swallowed because my mouth had gone dry. "My parents paid it." Asher held my gaze. "Your parents committed a federal crime." There was no pity in his voice, just fact. Then he stood. "We're going to Reno." The ceremony was held in a banquet hall downtown. High ceilings, warm lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of place where people celebrate promotions and pretend nobody ever fails. On the stage, a screen waited behind the podium, ready to play glossy highlight reels of young pilots smiling in cockpits like movie stars. Recruiters from major airlines sat in the front rows. Everyone wore their best version of themselves. Families buzzed with pride and perfume. David stood near the stage in his dress uniform, shoulders back, grin polished. My mother and father sat close to the aisle, practically glowing, like their son's success was a mirror they could finally admire themselves in. When they saw me enter, my mother's smile snapped into place like a mask. "Oh," she said, just loud enough for the people around her to hear. "Victoria." My father's eyes scanned me top to bottom, as if checking whether I'd improved enough to be worth attention. He leaned toward my mother, murmuring something that made her laugh softly. David turned and spotted me. His smirk showed up right on time, like an old scar. "Well, look who decided to join civilization," he said, stepping closer. "Did you come to congratulate me, or did you need something?" I looked at him, calm. "I came to watch you get what you earned." His eyes narrowed. "Finally, a supportive sister. Grandma would be proud." The mention of my grandma hit like a slap. I didn't flinch. I just smiled slightly, because sometimes the most satisfying thing you can do is refuse to react. My mother leaned in, voice syrupy. "Try not to make this about you, okay? Just behave." My father added, low and warning, "Don't embarrass us." I glanced past them, where Asher stood in the shadow near the back, broad-shouldered, unreadable, a badge tucked discreetly under his jacket. He looked like a wall that could walk. I faced my parents again. "Relax," I said. "I'm not the one who should be nervous." They stared, confused by the tone. Confusion is a luxury people like them rarely experience. It doesn't sit well on their faces. The ceremony began. Speeches about discipline and excellence. Applause. Videos of planes cutting through clouds. Then the host smiled brightly. "And now," he announced, "our top graduate, David." My mother clapped so hard her bracelets rattled. My father's chin lifted, proud as if he'd personally flown the hours. David walked up, collected his award, and turned toward the audience with that practiced grin. The lights dimmed. The screen behind him came to life. For one heartbeat, I almost pitied him. Almost. Then the truth appeared. Not a glossy montage, not a triumph reel. A split-screen chart. David's flight log on the left, pristine and perfect, night flights, storm hours, instructor sign-offs. On the right, GPS transponder data and engine status reports showing the aircraft sitting in the hangar, coordinates unchanged, engine cold, night after night. A murmur rippled through the room like wind through dry grass. David's smile faltered. "What is this?" he whispered, still holding his award like it could anchor him. The next slide hit. Bank transaction records, a $50,000 transfer. Sender, my father. Recipient, the chief instructor's offshore account. Memo line blank, the kind of silence money prefers. My father went completely still. It was almost art, the way his face drained, the way his hands froze mid-clap, the way his eyes widened as if the screen had become a firing squad. My mother made a strangled sound. "No," she said. No, this is..." David's award slipped from his fingers and clattered onto the stage. The sound was loud in the stunned quiet, like a bell marking an end. I stood. The chair scraped softly behind me. Every head turned. I walked down the aisle with steady steps, as if I'd rehearsed it, which I had in my mind 1,000 times, in every version where I didn't get to speak. I reached the podium and took the microphone. My voice came out clear, cold, carrying across white tablecloths and shaking pride. My parents told me, at least it finally did something for this family. When they sold the lakeside cabin my grandma left to me for David's pilot training, I said, letting the words land. David told me, "Well, now you're useful." A few gasps, a few sharp inhales. People love a story when they realize they're inside it. I turned slightly, looking straight at David. "My cabin really did pay for something bigger," I continued. "It paid for a federal crime." David's mouth opened. Nothing came out. I faced my father. He looked smaller than I remembered, not because he'd changed, but because I had. "You didn't invest in a pilot," I said. "You bribed someone to sign off fake hours. You helped put an unqualified person into the system." My mother lurched forward, voice rising. "You ungrateful! This is a lie!" And then Asher stepped out of the shadows behind me and moved to the side of the stage, visible now, unmistakable. The badge flashed under the lights like a blade. His voice was calm when he spoke into a second mic, but it carried the kind of authority that turns hysteria into background noise. "I'm Asher Heatherly, FAA Investigations," he said. "David's certification is being suspended pending formal revocation. This academy is under federal investigation. Anyone involved in falsifying records and bribery will be contacted by our office within the week." The room erupted, but not in applause. Recruiters stood, faces tight, already pulling phones out, already making calls that sounded like, "Remove him from the list," and "We're withdrawing immediately." A man in a tailored suit near the front shook his head slowly, like he couldn't believe he'd almost hired a disaster. David swayed on stage, eyes darting, searching for an adult who could fix it. For the first time in his life, there was no one. My father made a sound, half anger, half panic. "You," he started, pointing at me as if I'd broken the law by telling the truth. I leaned slightly toward the mic one last time, softer now, almost intimate. "You wanted me to be useful," I said. "Congratulations." Then I stepped away. Behind me, my mother's voice cracked into pleading, then into rage. My father started shouting about sabotage, about jealousy, about family. Family. The words sounded like a joke told in a room that stopped laughing. Asher guided me off the stage and toward the exit. His hand wasn't gentle exactly, but it was steady, an anchor, a boundary. Outside, the Nevada sun hit my face like a reset button. The parking lot smelled like warm asphalt and possibility. For a moment, I just stood there breathing, waiting for grief to jump out and tackle me. It didn't. What I felt was something quieter and heavier. Relief. Not the kind that makes you giddy. The kind that makes you finally stop clenching your jaw. Asher looked at me. "You okay?" I let out a short laugh. "Define okay?" He nodded once, like he accepted that answer. Then, in his gravelly voice, he said, "You did good work, partner." Partner. Not burden. Not spare part. Not useful only when sacrificed. I thought about the cabin, the porch, the lake, my grandma's hands warm around a mug. Losing it had been like losing a limb. But tonight, standing in the sun after pulling the truth into the light, I realized something. They could sell wood and land and a view. They couldn't sell what my grandma had actually given me. She gave me a spine. Inside the hall, sirens weren't wailing yet, but the consequences had already begun. David would face fraud charges. The academy would be gutted. My parents would mortgage their own house to pay lawyers. Lawyers who wouldn't be able to buy back a reputation, or erase a federal record, or make airlines forget. And me? I didn't get my cabin back. Life doesn't do clean returns. But I walked away with something I'd wanted since I was a kid, standing on that creaking porch, listening to the lake. Proof that my worth wasn't negotiable, that my mind wasn't busy work. That integrity, unlike a legacy property, can't be sold out from under you. If there's a moral in all of this, it's simple and brutal. You can steal an inheritance to buy someone a shiny status, but you can't buy skill or honor or the instincts that keep people alive 30,000 feet in the air. And sooner or later, the sky collects its debts. Tonight, it started with a screen lighting up, and my father freezing,